All right, we're dropping into the possibility of unmasking illusions. We had the honor and pleasure of doing this very particular episode live in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, in-person event that was extremely inspiring and deeply moving. And I'm so excited to share that all with you today. So here with Rivky, let's do this. I guess my first question is what kind of mask are we talking about here?
Yeah, there are many kind of masks and many kind of illusions that we're talking about today, and we're going to cover the gamut of this conversation in many different ways. The mask that we're talking about mostly is aspects of ourselves that are not yet conscious even to ourselves. The masks that we're talking about are aspects of ourselves that are in the shadows. So sometimes we don't even know that we're wearing a mask, and sometimes we don't even know the illusions that we're carrying. And those are the kind of masks we'll be talking about today, starting with what one of my teachers calls the masked coping style. The masked coping style is the kind of person that is so attuned to everybody else but feels lonely inside,
Hmm.
is picking up what everybody else is putting down, but feels not fully seen on the inside, has the illusion of being so connected on the outside, but feels disconnected from self and others on the inside. And the first mask and illusion that I want to address here is the discrepancies between insides and outsides. Often in many communities in childhood, we learn through osmosis that the way things look on the outside is more important than our inner experience.
Hmm.
So what happens is that then we attune to our children's outsides more than their insides. We attune to others' outsides more than their insides. And we're left with a society that is very outside driven, outside focused, and the insides often feel the most alone, the most abandoned, and the most left to themselves. And there are so many industries that are also here to support this wound, to support this shadow, to support this coping style, and make the outsides look better, shinier, more successful, more connected, when the insides are still increasingly feeling more alone. Because as the illusion continues to expand, so does the inner experience continue to expand. So the deeper the mask is and the more unconscious it is, even from ourselves, the deeper sometimes the pain is and the struggle is on the inside. So outside versus inside, the way it looks versus the way it feels. And sometimes others don't know that either, that we're wearing a mask because we don't even know it and others don't even know it. And I think that that's a really important mask to talk about.
Yeah. Wow. So it makes me think about myself, actually. And for so long, I identified as being the easygoing person that I am. And on the outside, it really does look like that. It looks like easy, fluid, agreeable, not confrontational, ready to rough it, whatever that looks like, without consideration for the quiet resentments or the things that it really feels like in the inside. And I'm remembering this particular incident where what's interesting is that the illusion that you uphold for yourself, that you're also being celebrated for, is the way that people also from the outside treat you because
Yes.
they're going based on your mask. So the mask that you're wearing, the illusion that you hold, this ideal identity of self that's easygoing that I've been told about myself my whole life, that I felt the need to live up to and then be that person, compromising aspects of myself or feelings that I was repressing inside of myself, to then be received in this way that we went away for the holidays with our family. And I thank God come from a family of eight, and many of my siblings are married and they have children of their own. And my parents rented this big home for all of us to stay together so we can have this like joyous experience all together. And when we got there, my mom's like, I gave you this room, which was the master bedroom's closet that they transformed into a bedroom by putting a bed into it. And I know that you're so easygoing, and I knew that my other daughters-in-law or other people would not be comfortable with that. So I just gave that room to you. And so, yeah, technically, I could be easygoing and it was fine and it was great, but there wasn't even an ask.
Yeah.
There was this like, oh, you're that easygoing person, so you're just going to put up with whatever it is and you're going to be the one to flow into this space and be super chill about it and not be upset with it and just take it with grace and with ease, which is the way that I responded to it then because then I didn't know.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that I was wearing this illusion of easygoing in a way that wasn't in alignment with what's happening inside of myself.
Yeah.
But as we grow and as we develop and as we recognize our masks and as we bring the unconscious to consciousness, the outside actually looks pretty similar because I am a pretty easygoing person. It's true. But I can say yes or no with an alignment of my soul where there isn't a compromise inside. And that yes can be a wholehearted yes. And the no could be a wholehearted no. And the possibility for conversation becomes available, right? Because then I just took whatever they gave me. It was like, great, you want us to sleep in a closet? Me and my husband? Great, we'll sleep in a closet, whatever. But I feel like at this point in my life, that would be a conversation. I'd be like, no problem, but I would love to be asked,
Yeah.
because that feels more aligned. That means I get to make the decision about how easygoing I want to choose to be in this situation.
Yeah. And just breaking down that story for a minute, what I feel is like, what's the formula here? We don't even know what illusion or mask we're holding because sometimes we can look at our mask and we could feel like it's our own face. We can
Absolutely.
look in the mirror and we can see the mask and think that it's our own face because the illusion has been fed for so long. The identity, the personality has been projected onto us and given to us for so long that we become that. And if you see me, if you're watching this video, you see me do quotation marks with my fingers because and then what happens? It gets reinforced by compliments, reflections, and feedback. And then their actions are in alignment with our mask or our illusion. And that's how people also show up to meet us. So when we make the unconscious conscious, what's the way to do that? Actually, to go inside and admit, or even before admitting, identify what we really feel. And sometimes we can be afraid to confront the mask because it means that it will interrupt the status quo of our relationship with ourselves or others, or even our relationship with something as intense as our identity.
Yes.
And when we talk about mask, we're really talking about the way that I define the word ego, which is anything that we believe that is our identity that is in our soul,
Right.
right? Anything we believe that is our identity and that is in our soul. And I really hear you and know that there are aspects of your soul that are easygoing,
Yeah.
but there are also aspects of your soul that are aligned with having needs and having desires. So bringing those two things into alignment feels like a really important thing for our soul. But anything that is in our soul, anything that we identify with, like ego, like fears, will hold us back from being in true alignment with all the balance of all those things together.
Right. So it sounds like the check-in point with the outside thing versus the inside thing, and that checkpoint of soul alignment is where's the fear?
Yes.
Because when you are in soul alignment, there isn't the fear. You feel
Yeah.
comfortable in your decision. You feel comfortable in your communication. You feel open to receiving and to giving. But if there's something inside of me that's like, oh, I don't want to put up a fuss because of this, because I'm afraid that it will make everybody disappointed or feel upset or whatever. So I'm going to swallow something back inside of myself. I think that's a really telling point of where this is ego identity versus soul alignment.
100%.
Yeah. And the
Yeah.
nuance of that, because like you said, there is an aspect of my soul that is easygoing. And there's also an aspect of my soul that's sacrificing right now. And so,
Yes.
like, how can I find the place where I can find the balance and the harmony between those parts of myself that are important? Like, it's important to be, for me, it's almost like a value to be able to be agreeable and enjoyable and soft in company. I love that. But checking in with, like, where am I sacrificing? Is there compromising here that's carrying some kind of quiet resentment? Is there something here that really needs to be spoken? And can I let go of the fear of the disappointment it may bring, or the confrontation that may arrive in that space, to be able to, I feel like, I guess the word I'm looking for is, the word that's coming through is triumph my soul, like to
Mm,
be there to support the alignment, to support the soul that's
yes.
asking to be, I can't think of the word.
Asking to be lifted up in some way, asking to be present, asking to be in the light. That's the way that
Yeah, feel that, feel that.
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I think what's also so important is that sometimes when I talk to parents about like shifting the paradigm in the home from the inside to the outside, you
Mm,
know, and I've worked with people whose children wanted so many material items.
mm,
And the parents asked me, am I spoiling my kids? Are they indulged? And I talked to them about the conversation under the table, right? And we've spoken about this in other podcasts. The conversation on top of the table is that they want all these gifts and all these things, and they have this endless desire for money and items and resources. But underneath, what are they asking for? For connection to you. And if you can really presence that, then the outside thing becomes much smaller and the need becomes less insatiable. And
mm,
parents sometimes say, but outside things are important. Like it's important to tell my children that they're pretty, or that there's this and that there's that. And it's money's important and the way that people see me is important. And I really honor that thought and that idea. But what I like to say, and this is a little bit of a radical thing to say, and it's okay, is that the pendulum's got to swing, meaning that if you come from a society or a culture or community where the outside thing was the most important, sometimes the pendulum has to swing in order to find balance. You know how the world is swinging more toward holistic health than medical, and then it lands in the middle, and which everything can work together in balance and in harmony and in beauty. Yes, it could be that outside things are important, but when the focus is so much on the outside, sometimes we need to swing the pendulum to really focus on the inside. And in working with people who come from Orthodox Jewish communities, at times there are people that I have worked with that have changed the way that they relate to the community in certain ways. Let's say they dress a little bit differently, or they show up a little bit differently. And countless of those people have told me, they said, I deeply respect and in many ways resonate with the ways that I grew up. But these aspects of this are so focused on the outside that I need to swing the pendulum all the way to the other direction in order to find my soul alignment. And there's something inside of that that I deeply respect, because there's something inside of that that they're saying, I am willing to forego my identity
mm.
for inner connection. I'm willing to forego my identity, which is the mask, which is the illusion, for what's real inside of me. And that is so honorable to me.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I think that there's, for each person, it's going to be a different space. I know that I spent the weekend at a friend, and she was telling us that, she also comes from an Orthodox religious background, Jewish background. And her culture, everybody covers their hair with a wig. And she has chosen, and the what is more soul aligned for her is not to cover her hair anymore. But she said that when she goes for a family celebration to honor her mother and to not cause friction and draw too much attention to herself, she puts on a wig to be honorable to her family. And my cousin that was there was like, "Ooh, that doesn't feel good at all. That feels like a sacrifice or a betrayal of self so that you can please somebody else." Like, to her, that just really didn't feel aligned. And when I was listening to the conversation, I was like, you know what? This is a very personal
Yes.
experience. Like, I think that there are times that the mask is important, and there's times that the mask, we're ready to take off the mask. And I think that there's a whole gamut of for each person individually where that lies, you
Yeah.
know? And for this person in her private life, she felt like she made a decision that feels most aligned for her. But the other value that she holds is that, that connection with her family, and they don't get it. They don't, and maybe they're not ready to see the her unmasked in the way that she is ready for herself. And so to honor the pace of others and to honor the connection in her life, this is the way she's choosing. But my cousin was like, "Oh, hells no. That's not for me." And that's true. That's not for her. Which
Yeah.
means that for her, what feels more aligned is like if I'm making this decision in in the privacy of my home, I'm making this decision for myself in all places and kind of like this is what I'm choosing and I hope that you can honor my choice. So
I
it's
think
interesting.
very interesting. And I think we're opening up a can of worms. And this is a very controversial topic, and there's tension in this space. And I just want to honor that for those who there's tension in the space between what is sacrificing, what are my values, and sometimes my values are even a mask
Yes.
to my desire to belong.
Yeah.
Right? So I mask, I say, this is my value to stay connected to my family, when really it's an illusion because I know that my family will not accept me. And I'm not speaking about myself, but we know, or they know that their family will not accept them if they are any other way besides for being like them. So
Right.
it's a very slippery slope of a conversation, and it takes a lot of confronting to really discover that a lot of our values are masked as altruistic, I'm doing this for them kind of thing, when really it's just a deep fear of losing belonging. And that space is not necessarily something that one could change in a day, but the more that we have these conversations, the more that this conversation is public. And this is also another radical point of view that I have that not everyone will resonate with, which is I really believe that sacrificing should never be.
Yeah.
And I really believe that there's something in the space of, there's something in the space of giving from a whole heart. There's something
Yeah.
in the space of compromising, right? There's something in the space of surrendering to. But if it feels like a sacrifice, that means there's a secret resentment inside where you're smiling to someone's face, but you're sticking your middle finger up behind your back. Like there's something not quite aligned in that space where you're smiling, but you're growling inside. That's the energetics of sacrificing that I think are so important to presence inside of this space of the mask. Like if we are thinking that the mask is our real face, but then we're smiling, but inside we're screaming, there's something not quite aligned. And I want to also presence that sometimes there can be an experience where everyone else is in masks and you are wearing your real face. And they think that you are in a mask because they don't even know that they are
Yeah.
ascribing to an illusion. And one of my therapists once told me the story, and please forgive me if I'm repeating it in a totally not exactly aligned to what it was way, but there was this TV show in the 60s, I think it was, that she said. I wish I would know the name. Probably someone listening will write in and tell us. There was this community, um, and there was this beautiful, beautiful woman, and there were all these people in the show with masks on their faces. And they all told her, there's something wrong with your face. Like, you got to fix your face. There's something wrong with your face. You got to fix your face. And she went under, like, she said, okay. And she was in the hospital and she was like under a surgery and about to be put under anesthesia. And suddenly, like, the doctors that were leaning over her took off their masks and they all had this pig face.
Mm.
And she was able to see how everybody else had this other face and she had this beautiful face. But in this space, in this community, in this town, she was the outcast. And really, she was so beautiful. And there are so many people who feel like when they take off the mask, people project a mask onto them and they say, oh, you must not be happy, or you must not, there must be something wrong with you. And often when somebody doesn't want to look at their own shadow, they project it onto us. And we could start to believe that that is who we are. And that's like that funhouse mirror, when you go to
Mhm.
the jumping place with your kids, and there's these fun houses where you kind of look weird. Parts of your head look skinny and parts of your body look fat, and just the whole thing is just kind of illusory. We start to believe the funhouse mirror is who we are. And that's the illusion of projection. And people who are afraid to look at their own shadow can project the illusion onto us and
Mhm.
can tell us that we are the problem. And
Mhm.
that's something that happens in society, especially with children who are way showers and in some ways children of light. There are children in the world who are born with a certain sense of prophecy. There are children in the world who are born with deep wisdom. There are children in the world who are born very conscious. And Hashem, God, puts them in the world. And then they go to school, they go in their home, and they say things and they question things and they ask questions and they get shut down and they get
Mhm.
shut down and they get shut down and they start to believe that there's something wrong with them
Yes.
instead of with the system at large, or instead of the fact that what they're doing is shining a light on shadows that maybe adults around them don't want to look at. And
Yes.
there's something so important about this. This is the shadow in some ways of the therapy world, where a child feels something that isn't quite right because it isn't. And then the parent sends them to therapy or something like that. And then the child believes, oh, there must be something wrong with me that needs to be fixed.
Mm.
And I think there's something so, instead of with the system, instead of with their mother, instead of with their father, instead of with whatever might be going on inside of their home or inside of their heart or inside of their family system. And instead, we look at the behavior as the problem as opposed to addressing what the root of the problem is, which might be something that has to do with a shadow inside of us.
Yes.
And that's why when I work with parents and children, I find it imperative, and why I originally wanted to go to school for social work, because I started off working with kids, because I was like, there's this parents are sending their children to be fixed when really the
Mhm.
children are not the problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
And unconsciousness in our world is the problem. And when we send our children to therapy because we believe they need to be fixed because we're afraid of looking at our own shadows, what we do is we perpetuate the problem of people in the world thinking that they are unworthy, not enough, too much, or that there is something wrong with them.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. And it's making me think of a moment in my life in my childhood
Mm,
where I had this interaction with my mother. So my mother was born to a beautiful woman who was, from the way I understand it, suffered severely from mental illness to the point that my grandfather had to make choices to take his four children and bring them up independently. But in those days, there was no talking about anything. And so my
yes.
mother was all of 4 years old and taken to a different country to start a new life without ever having the possibility to talk about what the experience was for her. But
Yeah.
I didn't know this. I was a child. And I learned in school that on Yom Kippur, which is the holy of holy days in the Jewish calendar, there is this very special prayer that is said for the people who have passed on. And anyone who does not have somebody that they're praying for because they thank God have their parents don't stay in the synagogue. They all step outside.
Yes.
So as a child, I grew up with my grandfather married to a woman that we addressed as Doda Sarah, which meant Aunt Sarah. And my understanding was that this was not my mother's mother, this was my grandfather's wife. And so we were at the synagogue and it came time for this prayer, and they kindly asked everybody who doesn't have someone that they're praying for to step outside. And so I proceeded to step outside and I noticed that my mother was coming outside. And so I turned to her and I was like, wait, why are you coming outside? Isn't your mother dead?
Mm,
And this was not something This is her shadow. This is not something that she ever had the opportunity to talk about. And I was already 8 years old and she still didn't have that opportunity. And so the reaction that I received from her with a facial expression that will never leave my mind was like, of course my mom is not dead. And I remember being 8 years old and being, wait, what? How was I supposed to know that?
Yeah.
This is not information that was ever shared to me in my life. My assumption as a little girl is that the only reason why my grandfather was married to a different woman was because his wife must have died.
Yeah.
My mother's mother must have died, and we didn't talk about her. There was no discussion of her in my life. And so, in that moment, I mean, now as an adult, I have so much compassion for my mother's experience. I understand so much that she's been through. I understand her reaction and where it was coming from. I get that. But at 8 years old, I was shut down.
Yeah.
And the decision that I made in my little tiny mind at that moment is I never want to be the source of disappointment. I never want to be someone who causes a reaction like I saw in my mother's face. And so I shut that part out. The curiosity, the light, the questions that were all just coming from an innocent child who wants to understand more about where she comes from and what's going on here because I wasn't given the information and I didn't know. And in this situation, it was like my mom in her shadow. And I have so much compassion for that because the generation before us didn't have the luxury and didn't have the resources and didn't have the ways. And this is the way they understood it to be the best. This is the way they understood it, not knowing how this translates and how this perpetuates. And thank God we're in a healthy relationship where we can heal so many dispute and get so close in the ways that felt so severed in those times. But yes, but as a little kid, you don't think, oh, my mother must have been through a lot and not had that information.
Yeah.
So I just thought, oh shoot, there must be something wrong with what I asked if
Yes.
if it received that kind of reaction. And I'm never gonna say anything about this topic ever again because I don't want to cause that sort of reaction in my mom.
Exactly. And again, I'll say this till I'm blue in the face. A child doesn't start to believe, oh, there must be a shadow in my mom. Oh, there must be a secret my mom is keeping. Oh, there must be so much pain. Oh, my mom's mom is not well. The child starts to believe there must be something wrong with me. Or even more deeply, I must be in some way a source of disappointment if I'm curious. And that's how we form these beliefs inside of ourselves. And there's opportunities for healing, but just the story feels so important to share so that people understand the impact of their shadows on their children. And the more conscious we are, the less we repeat these patterns. And I remember when I was in fourth grade, I had a teacher who I asked a question to. We were learning Torah, we were learning some kind of Jewish teaching, and I had a question about one of the archetypal teachings that we were learning. And I was a very insightful child, and I had very good questions. And I was not here to just receive learning with an open mind. I was more in some ways more open-minded than that. I wanted to understand all the perspectives. I wanted to be in the tension of the teaching. I wanted to be in the mystery of the teachings. And and I raised my hand and I asked a question. And it took me a lot of courage because I saw the way that the teacher responded to the questions that other people asked. And I understood something intuitively that felt like I didn't really want to raise my hand. And I
Mm,
waited, and I remember the feeling of like my hand almost going up in the air and then putting it
mm,
down, and almost going up in the air and then putting it down. And but I was enraptured by this topic and I felt this bubbling of energy come out of me and I just needed to ask the question. And I asked the question and the teacher said in Yiddish, we didn't speak Yiddish in our school, but she said it in Yiddish. She laughed at me and she said, "That's a kasha funamaisa," which means basically it's better in Yiddish for those who are listening who understand Yiddish, but it means, oh, that's a question from a story. Like you can't ask a question from a story. The story just happened already. Like that's kind of what that means.
mm,
And I remember hearing that and feeling so disillusioned.
mm.
And a fourth grader should not be cynical. A fourth grader should not be jaded. A fourth grader should not believe that the adults around them won't listen to what they have to say. And I remember that moment formed and solidified this belief. I was like, They're not they that like that
Mhm.
they is
Mm.
not available for my questions.
Mm.
And I think that there's something so imperative about listening to children. And the projections also happen with spouses, with business partners, right? The projections of our we can each do it. The projections of our shadows onto others when we don't want to look at our own illusions, our own identities, our own masks that we're holding.
Yeah.
And I once had a client who gave me permission to share this story. Their child told them that his sexuality was different than the way that they had thought it was.
Hmm.
And the parents were very religious people, and they came into my office and we sat on chairs, and the father was so angry. I thought he was going to throw a vase at me. And he grabbed the vase with his hands, and I thought he was going to throw it at me. He was so angry. His blood was like rushed to his face. I almost saw like steam coming out of him energetically. He was so mad, and he wanted me to just fix it and do something about it. And I can't believe that my son is this way.
Mm.
And suddenly I got this intuitive feeling. And when those come over me, it's over. And
Put the vase
I
down.
I was like, okay, this is risky because a vase could hit my head, but I'm just going to say this anyway.
Yeah.
And I looked at him in the eyes and I spoke very slowly and I said, usually when we have such an extreme reaction to something, it means that it might be something that's also inside of us. And suddenly he put the vase down. He sunk into his chair. His head went into his lap and he started to sob.
Mm.
And we just waited, myself and his wife. And when he stopped crying, he looked at me with honesty and he looked at his wife and he said, I've struggled with my own identity and my own sexuality.
Mm.
And my son's shift in his identification really triggers me for that reason.
Wow.
And this man has done such excellent work since then. And he's given me permission to share this story because he said if it could help one person, he wants to help. And I think that
Wow.
we can learn from the story that if it's hysterical inside of us, and if we feel like we want to project it and we want to be really angry and we want to, you know, we put our values behind it and we put religion behind it. And although whoever it is behind it, there's usually something there that's personal.
Yes.
And sometimes I once learned this line, if it's hysterical, it's historical.
Mm, I love that.
And if it's hysterical, if it's historical, if it's hysterical, it's inside of me. And it's
Yeah.
really, really important to be present to that. Yes, very much.
Also, so beautiful. I feel like it's unique to really soften into being honest with ourselves in that way
Yeah.
and like subsiding in the anger and coming into what was really so alive inside of him. And yeah, I feel like also with our children in general, everything comes from something. You
Yes.
know what I mean? Sometimes it's like, where does that come from? Well, I think the curiosity starts within me. Where does it come from inside of me? Because I am so deeply a part of the nature and nurture of this child and of their experience and of my reaction to their experience. And so that's a really important thing to consider. It's a really important thing. It's like, I actually was brought up with this saying, which is kind of funny, but not true. But my grandmother would say, which my parents would then say, it's like, how do two normal parents have so many crazy children? Like that was their thing.
Right. Where do you guys come from? Well,
Yeah.
somewhere.
Yeah. And it's like, okay, if that's the way you want to frame it, but let's be real, okay? We're not this crazy because we just fell off a tree that was out of nowhere. We came from the tree, okay? And the tree is pretty wildly crazy. So let's be real?
Yes.
But yeah, that was like a saying. I'm just remembering it now. In my lifetime, I remember my grandmother saying it, and all of my aunts and my dad, they would all repeat this, and it was like a source of laughter. I don't even know if they fully got it. But the truth is that what we're looking at is the reflection, is the mirror back at ourselves, is the clarity actually of the illusion, right? Because like
Yeah.
this illusion of like, no, but my family's going to be perfect and it's going to look like this way and it's going to look like that way. And I'm going to show it on Instagram in that way. And I'm going to sell my perfection story to everyone else in the whole world and get all the validation for that illusion where it's like, actually, no,
Yeah.
that's not
Social
where we're coming
media.
from. Yeah.
Social media is a way to keep the mask going and keep an illusion going for some people. And some people on social media also just honoring do show their own face and do show their real face. And you know what? It's felt.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. The more conscious we become to illusions and to what's real, we can really start to differentiate and understand that very, very deeply. And we can feel it in the resonance field. We can feel it in the field of resonance that we share. We can feel it in the energy. We can feel it in the frequency. We can feel it in the vibration. And the more we tune into frequency and energy and vibration, a lot of those other things, those more illusory things fall away. And I remember at the beginning of when I started working with kids, we used to have these meetings at the beginning, evaluations that I would give. And before I would give evaluations, I would watch other people give evaluations and
Hmm.
be like part of the team. And I remember there was this woman once she came in, she's like, "Can you make the temperature higher? No, can you actually make the temperature lower?" She's like, "I need to take off my coat. I need to put it on. Oh my gosh, I'm so hot." And she's like, "I don't understand why my child's so fussy. Like, I don't know why he's so sensory. Like, where does he come from?" And then another mother once came in and she's like, "My child is so angry. He's just so angry. He's never like, where does he fall from? You know?" And it's like, or a flat tone. It's like, I don't understand why my child is depressed. There's no aliveness inside of them. It's like seeing that so often helps me see how easily we project the things that are too scary to look at because onto our children. And sometimes people do see it in themselves, but they're just like, I'm a lost cause. Let me help my kid. But there's something about
Hmm.
that in which we're trying to like give our kids our dreams and our aliveness that we don't have that doesn't work.
Right.
And I shared this story at the live podcast, which was so much fun, about this Rebbe, which is a Yiddish term for a Hasidic leader or a Hasidic rabbi. Sometimes they have many, many followers, like talking about hundreds of thousands. And there are multiple different sects of Hasidic Jews, and they each have a leader. And when I started doing this work and it became more public, I had different leaders of different kinds of communities, Jewish and otherwise, come start to work with me. They heard that there was something happening that was really wonderful and magical, and they wanted to receive it. And I had the opportunity to work with a really big Hasidic Rebbe, a big rabbi. And he came with some of his like followers, or in Yiddish, they're called Hasidim. And he came into my office and they wanted to accompany him to the session. And I asked them if they can wait outside. And we were doing some work, and it always started off physical, right? Like, oh, there's a back pain, and then of course it leads into emotional territory because I can't not.
Hmm.
And everything's connected.
Yeah.
And as we started to work together, something naturally fell into place for him. And he had a huge epiphany, which was that he had been in the tradition of their family for whatever reason that their children spoke in third person to them. So it was
Sound like.
so it's something like, is it okay if my father gives me a piece of chicken? I don't know.
Ah,
I don't know
okay.
exactly what that is. And the word, like, let's say the word for father in Yiddish was tati. So like, can I ask tati or to pass me the salt? Things like
Hmm.
that.
Okay.
And he realized through our work together, not through anything that I had said, I didn't even know that this was something that was happening in their home, that was something, even though it was a tradition that was somehow passed down in their families, that was something that had to go. And he
Hmm.
told me about it. And I said, why was that something that had to go? And he said, because I've been learning more about the insides than the outsides. And I realized that I need to, in other words, and he said it in Yiddish, that I need to swing the pendulum a bit because this is not supporting the inner connection that I'm
Mm,
desiring to have with myself and my children. And I told him, I said, you are a leader that's worthy of these followers because you do what you do when you know what you know. But when you know differently, not just know in your mind, but know in your bones, you shift. And I was so inspired by his desire for interconnection and the actions that he took. And I want to offer our listeners that whatever that shift is for you, how can you in your family system or in your partnership or in your friendships or even internally, what is one place that you can make an actionable shift to shift from a more illusory or outside way of connecting to a more inside way of
mm.
connecting?
Beautiful, beautiful offering. Wow,
Yeah.
it's so cool. It's so cool to come from like a deep tradition of doing something for so long and having the courage to be curious and to question and to recognize that some things have to change as
Yeah.
life progresses, and the connections that were suitable enough then, or the information, like even back to my mom's story, like the information that they understood then was what was suffice in the way that they understood it. But like this generation, it's just not so. My kid
Yeah.
is not just, I can't tell my kid why, like they'll ask me a question, why? And then like, because I said so. I, that's not this generation. Like my
That's not flying anymore.
no, like my parents told me things like that. I was like, but whatever it is. And they're like, because I said so. And I was like, okay, so I'm going to have to comply because they said so. But that doesn't fly. We're in a new world. We're in a new generation. And I think all of those bids are actually bids for deeper, honest connection that's outside of the illusion.
Yes.
The kid asking that question is a child who's like, can we step beyond the illusion and can we come closer in our soul connection? Can we come closer in our honesty and what's like the most real here, you know?
Yes.
Which is beautiful. It's so beautiful. It's like we're learning from the mirror of what they're offering us, which is telling us we want more. We want deeper connections. We want more honest connections. We want more connections that allow for questions to hang in the air. We don't have to fix it. We don't have to know. We can just be with.
Yes.
That's it.
And Kabbalah says that a challenge won't end until we learn the lesson from it.
Yeah.
So if your kid keeps doing the same thing over and over and over and over and over again that you don't like, there's probably a mirror there for you. And I
Yeah.
think that that's something that's really important that I've seen again and again when the parents that I work with are so brave because there's something about the work that we do, which is looking at what's happening as a mirror to what we need to learn on our soul's journey. And that's a very brave thing. It's much easier, quote unquote, to fix the problem, but the problem won't be fixed. It's going to come back to bite us because what we need to learn on our soul's journey still needs to be learned. And that's a big part of unmasking the illusion is understanding that, like, if something's not working, there's something to be learned here on a soul level.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So cool. Yeah. Sometimes the mask, like we spoke about before, is anything that isn't our real self. And a shadow or an unconscious aspect of ourself is not our real self. A defense mechanism or a way that we learn to cope in our life in order to survive is also not our real self. So we're going to be addressing those as defenses, which is these parts of ourself that are in defense to the pain that's underneath that part, and which is a lot closer to our real self than the way that we're acting. And those defenses are also masks. They're also illusions acting like they are our real self. And I think that in the live podcast, we spoke about a defense that you brought up of entitlement that I'd love to address here because I think that will be really valuable for our audience.
Yeah, totally. So What I've learned about myself is that being the oldest child and the way that I was in my life, I became a people pleaser pretty early on, which also meant that I couldn't have needs. Like needs were just too vulnerable. Needs were just the fear of not being met, the fear of being misunderstood, and that pain was too strong. And so I very elegantly created a reality for myself and an illusion for myself that I actually don't have needs. And
Mhm.
I did that through this beautiful mechanism called entitlement. Because if I'm entitled to it, I can just take it without asking, because asking meant I needed, and needing was too vulnerable. But if I'm entitled, then I am worthy and I can and I should and I will. And so I just take it. And so easily, in a disguise to myself, I had everything that I needed without the vulnerability of needing.
Yes, it's such a deep defense mechanism, way of coping. And I think the other end of the spectrum of entitlement is the martyr, right? It's like the person who doesn't have needs and therefore sacrifices and doesn't have their needs met. And you learned a really elegant defense mechanism and beautiful defense mechanism of ways to get your needs met, which is that you had a mask or an illusion of entitlement. And someone could look at that and say, Khani's taking whatever she wants or needs. And someone could actually title that mask as entitled or selfish or like you're taking, when really that is such an illusion to what you was really going on inside, which is a person who didn't believe she could have needs and ask for what she needs and get those needs met. And that's a really, really beautiful, elegant, again, defense mechanism.
Yeah, so what was cool was is that we just came off of this beautiful, deep weekend retreat intensive led by Rivky Gross. And I had the privilege of being there as chief of nourishment and receive, wow, so much insight and so much deep growth and so much healing in the space. And there was this moment where we were in a little eye contact exercise. And I told Rifki, I'm done. I'm done with honoring my defenses and protecting my defenses. And so much so, because in so many ways that because of the way that I showed up, people actually honored the way my entitlement by giving me what I needed. So I kept perpetuating this thing where I had the illusion of no needs. And I
Yes.
was like, I don't want this anymore, because what it takes me away from is the connection that I'm looking for. If I can't ask of something from you, we don't get to actually be connected. It doesn't
Yes.
work that way. And so in that space, Rifki's like, Connie, as your friend, I promise you, I will no longer honor your defenses.
Yes.
It was a really deeply profound moment. And then it played itself out, and we were able to see it because Rifki slowed it down and I was able to see it. And so this is what happened.
I can't wait.
So I packed for the weekend and I thought I brought even extra things. I'm pretty minimalist, but I even like took a few extra outfits, but somehow it got to the next day and I didn't have anything else to wear. But luckily, Rifki has a beautiful closet with lots of fun picks. So I helped myself into her closet and I found this like bohemian cotton gauze sort of like wrap robe dress type thing. And I put it on, and when I came downstairs, I just looked fresh, and everyone was like, "Oh, wow, Han, you look so nice." I was getting like all this beautiful feedback, and I was like, "Oh, I just went shopping in Rifki's closet, and I found it." And I said, and this is like my pattern, I was like, "It looks so good on me. I think I'm just gonna take it." So I planted the seed. This is how the entitlement works. The defense is so deeply ingrained that it builds on itself. So I presence this energy in the space where I was like, I'm just going to take it because it looks so good on me and she'll be fine with that. And so I'll just have it. Great. The rest of the weekend happened, blah, blah, blah. Everybody left. And then that night I was packing up my things. And as I was packing up my things, I took this bohemian bathrobe is what we called it. And I started to roll it up and put it into my suitcase. And Rifki made this remark of like, you're taking the bathrobe? And I was like, yeah, right? Like,
Yeah.
yeah, is that okay? is that okay that I'm going to take it? And Rivky kind of responded to me like, yeah, yeah, it's fine. What do I need a bohemian bathrobe for? Like, kind of like
Yeah,
this kind of like almost minimizing and almost like humorous disregard for the importance of it or like what it even matters and whatever that was.
totally. Like a
And
joke.
like a
Yeah.
joke. Great.
Take
I
it.
rolled it
Great.
up. I put it into my suitcase. We closed it up. The next morning, Rifki calls me and she's like, I saw what happened. I've known you for a long time now. And every time you told me about this entitlement aspect of yourself, I never noticed it. I never was like, where are you entitled? I know you're such a nice person and you're always so giving. And like, where are you taking? I don't understand where you're taking. And she's like, I think I understand now. And we broke down this exact scenario where the entitlement led to the mirror of the protection of my own defense,
Using humor.
using
I
humor as a
protected,
conduit.
yes. I
Yes,
protected your defense by making a joke. And when we slowed it down, we were really able to see how you took the thing and then what happens in my defense, inside of my defense mechanisms. I want to protect your defense, right? There's something in you that triggers something in me that wants to protect this defense in you. So I say something, I make a joke, I make it lighter. And what happens in that space? We lose relational connection. You lose the experience of receiving, and I lose the experience of giving.
yes, yes. And so being able to slow that down and to be able to see myself in that and to also recognize that there is a tango that happens in the space.
Yes.
There is a certain idolized version of self that we show up with that we almost demand to be received as, which then keeps us in this illusion. So it's our own doing and the doing of those around by the demand of what we put out as what we're available for,
Yeah.
right? In before this time, I was just not available for needing anything from anybody. Now I am. And so being able to slow this down and really see myself and other in relationship to me makes me understand how to soften so that actually what I was thinking to do, by the way, Rifki, which I didn't, was like, I want to take the robe and wrap it in gift paper and give it back to you so that I can actually receive it. Because what I
Yeah.
would love is to actually receive it from you.
Yes.
And I don't want to just take it. I don't want to mask my own vulnerability of need by entitlement and just taking because I do want to be in deep connection and in relationship with. And I do want to have the opportunity to utilize moments like this to ask so that there could be a possibility to give and receive, which creates the connection, which creates the building of relationship and the building of interconnectedness in a way that is healthy and beautiful.
Totally. And I think what's so important about all of this is my commitment to not respect your defense allowed me to bring this to you because I wasn't afraid of losing connection. I wanted to be in the truth of what
Yeah.
was. And I think that that's really important and unique. But also, like, just presencing the fact, I would love for you to have this robe. Like you found something that you like and I don't need it. If I need it, I'll call you. I'll take it back. It's not that big of a deal. But there's something inside of that space that got diminished, that got lost, which is the ability to be relational, which is the ability to have a connection, which is the ability to be on the frequency of receiving. And once you see that pattern, it's impossible to unsee it. And I want to point it out in other ways, right? Sometimes we can hide behind the illusion of entitlement. Sometimes we can hide behind the illusion of martyrdom, right? That could look something like, I have to go to this thing. And what do we lose in that space? The wanting to go, the desire to go, the choosing to go. So there's something about that that happens. And then there's something about projection of values, which is also a defense, right? Like all my children have to come to me for the holiday, right? And there's something in that space which then doesn't get, it's like, this is my value. And it doesn't give a vulnerability of saying, I want to spend time with you. can you please come for the holiday day? There's like an assumption that you have to, that
Mm,
loses the vulnerability in the space of connection, because we're so afraid in our society to have needs from one another, to rely on one another. And we're so far away from the village in which people really contribute and give and receive in a way of tiferet, which is the Hebrew word for balance or harmony, in a way where people are giving and it's not taking from them, and people are receiving and it's not sucking. And there's so many relational wounds that I feel are being healed in the collective now, where you and I can both exist, and you don't diminish me and I don't diminish you, and we can both exist in harmony. And my deepest desire for this world is that self and other can exist in harmony. And sometimes that means swinging the pendulum more to self. And
yep.
sometimes that means swinging the pendulum more to relational dynamics and more towards other. And only we know our own inner alignment in that, inside of that space. And I want to also say that what something else, like, besides for asking with vulnerability for something that we need, right? Not, that's a way to have connection and not hide under the defense of not having needs. Also appreciation, right? When we appreciate others,
Mm,
our children, especially our children, like, not taking the thing that someone did for granted, like, that's also really vulnerable, because what are you telling someone? How much they mean to you. But
yeah.
not only the giver of appreciation, also the receiver of appreciation. I spoke about this in other feedbacks, but I receive so much gratitude and appreciation and feedback. And it's because a few years back, I made a commitment to myself to take it all in into my body every time I receive it, and really receive what they're giving me. And when I receive what they're giving me, what am I giving them? The gift of receiving them. And then the cycle continues. And then the cyclical nature of life gets to keep flowing, and something doesn't get stuck inside of that space. And I think that that's so important, to be able to create the more beautiful world that our hearts know is possible. And another way of being real and presencing the insides, we spoke about asking for real instead of hiding behind our defenses or our values, is apologizing. Another way to talk about this is to talk about apologizing, because when we can apologize, we're also being relational, we're being real, we're being human, we're being human.
Mhm.
And the antidote to the mask, and the way to unmask illusion, is to allow in our humanity. And what does that do in that space? It brings everything back into balance. It brings everything back into balance. And the antidote to the mask is being real. And it's not about what we say. And this is the most important thing, probably, in parenting, in being a therapist, in being a partner, in being a friend. It's not about what we say, it's about what we model. It's not about what we preach, it's about how we be. It's not about what we speak, it's about how we act. And I think that that's also super important to presence.
Yeah. Beautiful. That's beautiful.
So we're going to finish off this podcast
What do you
now.
want? Yeah, that was beautiful. And I think that we're coming to a close now. And as we say goodbye, I just want to encourage our audience to honor our masks and understand that for as long as they've been there, they serve the purpose that they were here to serve. And when we bring the unconscious into consciousness and we recognize the illusion, that means that we're ready.
Mhm.
That means that we're ready to slowly unravel. And with that, sometimes there could be some shame that arrives because suddenly we become more aware. And then we realize in some ways how we were standing in our own way. And to just have compassion for yourself as you evolve into the unmasked version of who you are. And as you stand in all of what you have to offer this universe in honesty and in realness. It's
Yes.
we are human. This is the human condition. We're going to keep growing and we're going to keep learning. And if we can have compassion with ourselves as we evolve, we will do this the most gracefully and we will give the most permission to all the people around us to also do the same. like Rifki was saying, it's less about the words and it's more about the modeling. And when I can have compassion for myself and transcend spaces that I've been in, I am offering that modeling to my children, to my friends, to my spouse, and to the people in the world. And so I encourage you to be curious, to look at yourself in the mirror and look at the reflection looking back at you.
Yes. And thank you, Connie. Thank you for sharing that. And you just reminded me of something that my mom shared with me because she's an avid listener of our podcast.
Yeah.
And I sent her the notes of what we were going to be speaking about in our last recording of this topic, which was a bit different than this. For those who were there live, they got a bit of a different experience. And she read the notes and she said she loves the topic. It's an interesting topic. And she wrote me back something that I thought was so insightful. She said, sometimes a mask can be necessary for someone's survival, and they need to keep it on until they build themselves on the inside. And I found that perspective, her perspective, to be so compassionate. And I want to leave us with Hani's words and those words, which really seem to go together so beautifully. Wishing you all a beautiful week. And it's the month of Adar and Pisces, which is really the month of, in many ways, for the Jewish holiday of Purim, of unmasking illusions and blessing us all with the ability to see ourselves and each other with our real face.
Yes. Thanks so much. Thanks for joining us. Until next time. We are so humbled and delighted to have you with us. Our podcast is Real Life in Real Time, where we embark on curious conversations that expand our awareness and capacity for all that is possible.
The Possibility of the Universe podcast is only possible because of you, our audience. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thanks so much for being here, and thanks so much for listening. I'm Connie. First and foremost, I am a believer. I am a wife. I am a mother of 6 beautiful children. I am the co-owner of Mimulo, luxury florist and event production company. I am a life coach working with both individuals and couples to empower them to step into their own possibilities in this universe.
Hi, I'm Rivky, and I love life. I love heart-centered living. I love to be curious, and I love to connect with all things. I started off as a social worker and developmental therapist, and now I work as a somatic and subconscious practitioner using modalities such as somatic healing, breathwork, bodywork, hypnotherapy, and some really magical and incredible quantum healing technologies. I work with individuals, couples, run retreats and courses using these modalities to help people find the most freedom, presence, aliveness, and embodiment inside of their lives. The ways to contact us are through my website, rivkygross.com. That is spelled RIVKY dash, the straight line dash, gross, GROSS.com. You can also follow us on Instagram, Khani at Muckhome Sanctuary, and myself at Rifky Gross. We are here for any and all questions and feedback through the contact form on the website, and we're so looking forward to hearing from you.